Welcome to Creative Bites, your go-to podcast for an inspiring mix of creativity, entrepreneurship, communications, and much more. I'm your host, Iwona Fluda, and in each episode, we will bring you compelling stories from the movers and shakers across various industries. We will discover how ideas evolve, how communication shapes our world, and how the entrepreneurial spirit drives progress. Whether you're looking for inspiration, innovation, or just a good story, you will find it here. So tune in, join the conversation, and explore the many facets of creativity with us. Marie, it's such a great privilege to have you with me again today. And our focus today is on creativity, new technologies, and education. And I would love to ask you about your experiences and observations when it comes to all of the three focus topics today.
Well, first of all, hello, and who everyone is going to be watching this talk. I'm delighted to be here again for the third time and talk about one of my favorite subject, creativity. I think it's an interesting topic, and maybe if we start with technology, and probably what comes to mind when you send me the topics, and I saw education and AI. It was very exciting because there is so much happening at the moment around AI. A year ago, no one was talking about it. It was already existing. We were using it in different shape or form. But now that with ChatGPT, with what we've seen that it can do, there is a fear of a new tool. And I feel that every time that there is a new technology that is being created, the human brain react to it with a threat, like it's going to stop us, it's going to, and I want us to go back to maybe the 19th century when photography was invented, and we thought at the time that it was the end of painting, but it's painting still exists, we're still painting today, we're still using brush, but what it has done, it allowed at the time the painter not to be outside, but to be in a studio. It has allowed, so it opened up as well. It's like with writing, when the typewriter was invented, it didn't stop people to write. People write books and more books, and we read. So I think that there is always that threat and that misunderstanding. And I think that's what's important with technology, whether it's AI or any new form of creativity, is let's start by trying to understand it. And it's really hard because it's new. We don't have any data, we don't have any perspective to understand it. But it's by taking time and read around it and try as well. And I think that goes back to what you were saying in our last conversation, is experimenting these new tools and see, okay, what can it do and what can't it do? What are these limitations and what does it open the door to? There's always going to be a good side of it and a bad side of it. But at the moment, there might be a big focus on the bad side, which is driven by our fear of risk and of change. But it would be important and to today talk about what are the good side of AI, because we're talking about AI. And my understanding is that you've been using it, this new tool, quite a lot in your writing, in your creativity. So maybe, Ivona, can you tell us? I mean, I'm curious to hear what has been your experience with it, because I'm starting to kind of experiment it, but I'm really at the threshold of the experimentations where I think that you really explore it a little bit further. So I'm really curious to see what have you found and what is your, now that you've used it, what is your sort of feedback on it?
Thank you for that question. Also, thank you for sharing your thoughts on the topic. For me, I do use AI tools, but when it comes to writing, for example, I always write the text. Like it's me typing text because I love writing. That's kind of my zone of genius, let's say, my creative zone of genius. And I use AI tools to correct the grammar and syntax errors. So it happens sometimes, and I also, for example, with ChatGPT, when I put the text inside, very often it just plays around and just changes everything completely, and I need to remind it, look, I ask you to correct just the grammar and syntax errors. Could you please do it? And then when it kind of creates what I wanted, right? I'm happy to share that my English skills are already good enough to really write text I'm writing, and the errors or the mistakes I'm making are not really big. That's not really big deal for me. That's more like the, kind of making sure that everything is correct or, understandable for everyone. So that's how I use ChatGPT for the creative slash writing slash error correcting things. But what I
So
also
what's the
observe.
benefit? So what's the benefit of it? Because it sounds like it's helping you to be more accurate
Mhm.
and gain some time as well. So then maybe you can, um, because I saw something yesterday was saying our chat GPT were dictionary before, so we had to go and find the correct grammar. Whereas like this point is giving you more time to then maybe be more creative, to work on more projects.
Absolutely. I feel like it's really freed up my time in so many levels. And I feel like, in the past, I was just reading the text a few times just to make sure that everything is correct, that I didn't miss anything. And this day, I'm just like, I'm writing the text and I put it into the system and it corrects the different mistakes. And then I read it again and I'm happy with the results most of the time. Of course, we know that AI tools hallucinate a lot. That's why it's very important for me also to double check if that's what I wanted is really there. So I never post anything really just blindly because it was created by an AI tool. What I also observe is that with ChatGPT especially and other AI tools, we have this, I think like it enhances the creativity. You have so many, when I, for example, have a question or have any project, and I have my ideas, but I would love to expand the ideas, and I'm just, my ideas or my point of view, my world is very limited just to my box, right? So I just really love to learn from ChatGPT. Okay, what would be other ideas that you would play around with in this particular case? How would you frame that differently? So it's definitely something that expands my imagination and of course the abilities that I have as a human being.
So it sounds like you're not
Um,
just using it as a soundboard, but you're using it as to open your new perspective and to give you a different perspective and said, okay, well, this is my perspective, but what are the other way of you looking at it?
Absolutely, that's how I do it, and also because I realized that again that's how I feel about my expertise. It's very limited when it is an expertise in many different fields, but it's very limited because there's just so much out there. So when I search for different, so instead of Googling things, I would just go to ChatGPT and search for ideas over there. But with also this particular tool helped me, another AI artistic tools helped me is to translate my words into digital art piece. And that's something completely new. And I know that there are different discussions around this also related to IP rights and all of different context of AI art. Nevertheless, for me, it's like, as you mentioned, something so new that people are afraid it will destroy whatever the artistic work, for example. It's just not fair to the real artists. But from my perspective, what it does is it's kind of a new path for art in general, kind of a new brand of art, if you wish, that we
It's
can
interesting
also
what you said is
expand.
the real artist, because what is a real artist? Is the
Yeah,
artist that comes with the idea? Is that the foundation of a real idea? It comes with the idea and then it explained with it. I mean, it's no matter what sort of like medium they're going to use. It's just remind me of Pablo Picasso when he was starting to do all these faces and the distorted faces. People say it's not a real painter, it's not a real artist because they don't look like portrait. So what is a real artist, and when do we start to say, well, I'm an artist? Is that, for me, is the artist and the creator is the one that comes with the idea. Then there is okay, well, let's see what tools there's available that can help me to express the ideas. So of course AI is new, and there's some regulation and some limitations that we need to put on instead of, whether it's trademarks, instead of original pieces, but like with everything that came before. So I think the idea of what is the real artist is very interesting.
Absolutely. And I can just tell you, I didn't even know that I am the digital artist, if you wish. One of the connections on LinkedIn actually wrote to me, I really love your art. You're such a great digital artist. And I'm like, oh, that's interesting. I have never heard of that. No one has ever labeled me with that name. And then I realized that, as we both know, everyone is an artist in one way or another. That for me, the form of expression, translating my words into digital art. I just love doing that, and that's everything. For me, that's the end of the discussion.
So how would
And
you
of course,
label? I mean, and I'm not someone who likes label, but how would you describe yourself more? When you use your words, when you use AIs to transform your words into an image, how would you describe yourself when you do that?
that's a great question. I feel like I'm just a creative experimenter, if you wish. I just love experimenting with different things. I'm a typical early adopter, so whatever you put on my table, I would just play around these things and just, see how they work, what are the issues with the tools, how can we improve that. But, what I am thinking about right now is just, again, for me, digital art is just a new way of expressing ourselves. And if we are lucky enough to have audience and to put it out there and just to explore, that's fantastic. We all should do that. Also, art, for me at least, when I started doing that was around 2 years ago. I went through kind of a crazy healing process, and it really helped me also to heal pieces of me in a way, because I could express myself in a different way. And I feel like we could look at the new technologies exactly this way, on the brighter side, that they allow us to express ourselves better individually, but of course on the more meta or mega level, they basically democratize everything what we are doing right now, which I think is great, at least in our hemisphere, because I'm of course aware also of all of the different constraints related to poverty and people who just simply don't have access to digital products or to digital services.
So when did you first come aware of AI, and how was your introduction to AI? How did you sort of like navigate that first phase?
I feel like that's a great question. I feel like it was already many years ago, and that was one of my mentors telling me that everything what we are working on is like nothing, because AI is coming and AI will shift everything. And of course, from the time perspective, I started to learn a lot about the AI in general. Listen to different podcasts, and learning about the good side, but also the very ugly sides of what can happen with AI, because that's probably the first time in history when we see that the tool can learn from itself, that it can develop itself long term, right? Right now we are still in the machine learning phase, but still long term it can develop itself, and then it can make decisions on its own. And that's kind of dangerous, when you think of the ugly implementation of this type of skill. But for me, what I am curious about is like, how can we leverage these tools, because they already exist. So there's no one that can come and stop it right now. And I don't believe that everyone would want to stop the development right now, because it's already so far, and because everyone sees, especially the economic aspects of AI and how it can really bring more economic value to communities or to a few global giant companies, but that's another story. In general, the narrative right now is we cannot stop it. How can you make sure that it brings more value than it destroys, the society? And that's more like a philosophical topic, because we see that the development is already super fast, so no one wants to stop it. So how can we mitigate the situation? So what I'm doing with AI tools is very harmless. It's basically nothing. I'm just experimenting, playing with that. I'm putting it out to the world. I I talk about this a lot. I share my perspectives on AI, but the other more like profound influence of or impact of AI can be seen, for example, in the educational system. And that's what I feel right now is about the time for us to completely reshape the systems that we have been having already for the last 100 years, and just to kind of face the situation where we know already for years that regardless of AI or having this tool or not, having AI available or not, we know already for years now that the educational systems are just not serving any generation any longer. So that's a huge question about how can we change or mitigate the education in a way that will create a system that prepares children for the future. That is, by the way,
And
going
is it,
to be
are
so
you
much
talking
different than the one
about,
we are living in.
yeah, and I think in terms of education, what I'm curious to hear is, are you talking about the place of creativity in education, and the use of new technology in education? Because I mean, with creativity in education, there's something that it's extremely paradoxical. As I was talking to an artist last year, and she said, children, they are born creators. They learn to find solution to problems. They learn to build with their Legos. So they learn to by themselves find the solutions. They learn to explore creativity with their fingers in the mud, and we let them do that. And we are, as if you're parents, you are actually pushed to do that. It's really your role as a parent to help them be more creative and try to be more independent, because I think that's what it is as well. And then comes the education and the school education and the formal education, and it's almost that creativity is somewhat somehow removed by a system of grade when we judge someone who's good, who's bad, or very good. And then if you're bad, then you're going to stop. You don't want to be creative anymore. We don't talk about creativity in the same terms at all. We don't actually talk about creativity at all. So there is and then we're talking about this new innovation, but we don't know what creativity is anymore, and then we don't know how to deal with those new innovation. It was probably the same with computer. I don't remember at the time. It was probably the same with every technological or every invention. But what is your take on for you the place of creativity in the education?
Actually, it's one of the most important skills of the future in general. So I feel like in some maybe that sounds a little bit ironic, but we should stop kidding ourselves that the education system that we have these days is going to be any helpful for future generations, because it's not helpful right now any longer. What I feel, what I hope is going to change, and more like an idealistic scenario, is that we have AI tools, we have different type of tools that will help us to personalize learning curriculum for the children. So instead of teaching everyone exactly the same thing, we would know that this particular kid has this abilities or this talent or this interest, so we can put more effort and more resources into that part. But what I also hope that we will start teaching children how to live life, like real life skills, which is, for example, debating, having discussions, which is exactly creativity, solving problems. But we don't do it right now that much, or very often at all. And what I hope is that with the new tools we will just free up the space for new to come, which means children will not have to learn by heart any longer. So forget the boring biology classes. I love biology, but still forget that. They will learn by doing. So instead of sitting and memorizing tons of knowledge about the development of whatever human species, they would just go to the museums and discuss this, instead of having history classes where they need to learn by heart different dates, which most of the people just never remember. they will go and have like a, let's say, debate about, let's say something like model United Nations around, the political situation, instead of having, not knowing what to do with a challenge in the class. They would just go and design, a design sprint for the challenge that needs to be solved, and they would play around entrepreneurial ideas. Why not? And I feel like that's the real skills that we need to teach the children. Anything else will be or is already anyway, in kind of not relevant really. I do understand that we need to be aware of the historic events because we need to learn from them. Not quite sure how much we have learned so far, because it looks like to me that we are repeating history all the time. But still, I feel like what I hope for the next generation is that they will really tap into their powers and creative potential in the systems that are safe for them, like school. Schools are not always safe for the children, especially when children are not allowed very often to express themselves. So that's not the safe space when you're not allowed to express yourself. And where the trust is there, very often, there's this huge kind of dissonance between the trust that the school tries to build and the parents, for example, and society. So that's another part. So we have lots of things to do in this field, but I really hope that new technologies will allow us to completely free up our time. That's one part, and therefore children will be able to also to learn, the real life skills and not just learn by heart.
So it's interesting because when I'm listening to you, there's two things that come to mind. Well, I think there's the culture as well. I was raised in France, and we do our learning is very academic. And then when I came to England to do my university degree, I learned the practicality as well as the theory. We were not just so it was at university, but I feel like at least in the primary school or with my daughter, there is more of a practicality to the English system than maybe in the French system, for example. And so I wonder is how much is there is a part of culture as well that takes into that education. And the other thing that I wanted to be a little bit of a devil's advocate is when you talk about knowledge, does that mean that, and yes, I'm not for someone to learn by heart, because if you learn by heart, you're just being a robot and you're just learning, and then you forget what you've learned if you don't if it doesn't kind of if you don't have any emotions linked to what you're learning, any understanding. But when you say and I love the learning and the doing at the same time. For me, they're very much intricate. But when you say that you talk about knowledge, are you seeing that AI will then be, because of whether it's AI, but the technology of the future, we what's the how are we going to gain knowledge? Because it feels already that we have access to informations by the second on social medias and on different platforms, but we don't have knowledge. And sometimes I feel that that is something that is very detrimental to us, because we have all these bits of information, all this imaging thrown at us, but because we don't have the knowledge and the understanding, that we make our decision based on just like a quick emotion or a quick information without that information. So going back to knowledge and technology, if knowledge is removed from us, what are we left with?
That's a great question. Well, knowledge will not be removed from us. It will be just accessible, as you mentioned, by seconds everywhere. So if you would need to gather some knowledge or you need to search for something, then you will have access to that specific knowledge. Maybe the skill that we could frame here is, how to make a decision. How to make a decision that's good for you, good for the society, for the environment, or for the world in general. And one of the pieces would be search for evidence or search for knowledge, or just Google that, or do all of the background check. And very often, look what is happening right now. we do it as well. At least people who, who are conscious of that, and they want to make an informed decision, they will go and just search for answers or search for different alternatives. That happens very often, especially when someone gets sick, right? So you're not going just to go and have the surgery because that's the recommendation of this particular person. You will just go and double check and search and ask different people. And I feel like the skill we need to teach here is how to make an informed decision in general. And with access to technology and access to knowledge, we have all of that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I hear that. That technology is going to give us access to maybe more knowledge, but it's what we do with that knowledge and how we use those knowledge and information to, as you said, make the decision. And I found that today there's so many choices that sometimes people feel overwhelmed by choices and how to make decisions. And then you talk about right or wrong, but some people can I have a very different approach to what's right and what's wrong. There is what we see as right and wrong. So I think I mean, it's a bigger debate, but maybe what would be interesting is that for you, how do you make the decision, when you use a new tools and you've done your research, and then you've got those information, how does that help you to make the decisions? What do you make the decision based on?
Hard facts, but also, as you mentioned, but this is very human. Most of the time, we are making decisions based on our guts, actually, and then we try to justify our decision by our heads. That's what I also recently read about, and it's very interesting. But generally, I'm a very curious person. So if I have a challenge or if I'm searching for something, I would just go and check different things and different points to see, okay, what does it contain? Is it really what I want to do? What are the kind of long-term implications of this particular decision? But it's really very individual how we make decisions. I believe most of us are making, despite of access to the technology, to the knowledge, and despite of even analyzing different things, I feel like they are just backing our already emotional decision up, not really changing the already made decision. That's how I feel about making decisions in general. How about
So it's
you?
also so what I'm hearing is and there is this I don't know if you follow that, but there is a trend of talking about emotion and being emotionally educated as well, and that's I think that's what is important as well, is that making decision, learning about our emotions, about whether it's emotional intelligence, social intelligence, but learning how to use those emotions um, to make the right decisions, and then accumulating the information, not just on the surface, but going and doing the research and being curious and finding the research. I mean, I'm someone that probably react more on my guts than my research. I mean, I used to spend hours in libraries when I had to do research and when I was in university. But now I find it is really hard um, to just find the time to just make some specific research, because I'm very curious as well. So there's so many topics that I want to learn about, and I guess that what I've realized is I need to narrow them down, because I know that I'm never going to have knowledge on all of those topics. So I need to pick and choose and say, okay, well, what are the two I've chosen two this year, the two topics that I really want to have more knowledge about, because otherwise it's very hard to. That's where you can really spread yourself, uh, and having too many choices and too many information. So I think that for me, it was by making the conscious decision. So what is really important to me, what really matters, and I think we had that in our last conversation. It comes back to our value. I know that I'm always going back to values, but my values are curiosity, creativity is one of them, is a big one as well, and is how can I can I use those values as resources as well? And if I want to use them, okay, well, where are they going to take me, and how I'm going to use them? So I think that also going back to our values, it's a great way to help us make decisions, and then have the information, find the information about it, and acquire the knowledge. That's, I would say, that's my learning that I've over the years.
Very interesting. And look, maybe with the values, how often do we teach children about the values, or how often do we ask them about their values? Very seldom. That could be part of the curriculum, discovering your values, discovering who you are as a person, what really drives you as a person, is your personality, and all of these different pieces. That's something that we don't do at the moment. And I discovered my values in my late 20s, some time ago. And of course, they're subject for change, if you wish, all the time, right? Because we are evolving, we are human beings. But still, that's what I hope for the education, that the new technologies will enable us to change our focus on the human being and not on the human doing. And that's what I hope
what has
for.
been your experience? Because I think you did, you attending the AI Summit recently was it in Switzerland?
Yes.
Yeah, and so what have you seen? What were the discussions going on there? What are the topics talking? Because before we went online, you said that there's a lot of sort of fear and maybe misconception. So what did you what was your takeaway from that summit?
Thank you for asking. So the AI for Good Summit just happened at the end of May this year, and it was really fantastic. Really enjoyed that. There are a few things that I observed, and one of them is that we are not even aware, how fast the technology is really developing itself, or how fast the technology will expand in general, which we need to kind of look at as individuals, but also, of course, as a society, because the impact is going to be huge. There were lots of examples of how AI can be used. For example, I was participating in a workshop where we discuss cultural heritage and introducing neural links in general, how to introduce neural links, combining cultural heritage and different type of cultural aspects that people, could kind of just download with neural links, with a chip in the brain, which is also very futuristic and very interesting at the same time. What we also discussed was that, and I feel like that's very important, is seeing how fast. I feel like what they observed, there were lots of discussions about how exponential the technology is, but very little discussion about the good aspect of the technology itself. That's what I observe, at least. Marie, you are completely, yeah. Okay, I got you back. Hi, can you hear me?
Sorry, I don't know if it was me, but yes, I think Zoom kicked me out of the recording.
Hi, then I will repeat this part. I will just cut it. You asked me about the AI for Good Summit here in Geneva, in Switzerland, that happened at the end of May. So it's really interesting. There were lots of talks about the exponential technologies actually being created right now when it comes to AI. I think what we don't observe, or we don't take into consideration, is how fast the development is actually happening. That's something very interesting. Also, I participated in a workshop where we discussed cultural heritage and neural links, how we can use basically chips in our brains to download different knowledge. And that's also very interesting. That's very futuristic, but it's actually happening. It's being tested these days. For me, what I feel like, I observe lots of kind of ugly things when it comes to AI. So, for example, when it comes to how our data is being used actually to feed the big data systems, that's something very interesting. There were lots of discussions about data privacy and protection, which I'm not sure if it's going to happen really when most of the big tech giants are actually owning our data. That's what also interesting. What else? I think for us in general, I was very inspired by different ideas how we can do this, how we can use different technology, AI, of course, as a focus for good. So, for example, in the health industry, how can we diagnose people faster thanks to AI? So there are different aspects of what we can do, and definitely the discussions were very interesting. I'm just I'm still in between all of these different things because I tend to be very optimistic about technology and different technological advancement. But here, knowing a little bit more about that, I'm not sure. Knowing about how the technology can be used against us, how it can create itself to be against us. That's actually a huge topic. How it was a fantastic actually keynote given by Thorsten Harris, who is the CEO of the Center for Human Technology in California. So he talked about social media and what happened with social media and how much social media influenced our life over the years. And there were lots of distraction and mental illnesses and crime, different things happening all around social media, and how much we didn't learn much from this. So we should actually right now, because AI would be even worse when it comes to the combination of AI and social media, for example. So, I'm still really bit in between. Nevertheless, I feel like this type of discussions about the potential, but also therefore more important, the danger of AI are just super important these days.
So how can we educate ourselves when it comes to AI to make sure that we are using it for our own good and to enhance humanity, not to hinder humanity?
There are two aspects. One aspect is that we individually can use the tools to do something good, of course, right? We can use them to even create something beautiful, let's say digital art, whatever we like, to contribute to the cultural heritage, for example. I believe it's even more important that that's something we can do individually, but it's even more important that we have access or somehow we get into the decision-making level. Because what we are using here is just a part of the, like tiny part of the equation, but there are just so many developments right now that we don't have access to, and I believe we should have access to, at least to them in a way that we can contribute to the discussion and can contribute to the development. So for example, even with AI tools, and I can tell you as an example I just experienced even last week, when it comes to creating AI pictures, so the systems are so biased that when I write something around create me, let's say a journey of this successful person, very often would be a man. I need to explicitly write it is a woman, so it creates a woman, and usually it's a white person. So that also shows us how biased the tools are, how biased is the data that's in the tools, and of course we understand that. So I feel like people like us, from the business, from the civic society, from all around the cultures should be at the table discussing these things and contributing to these things, and that is not happening. And I think that's the very dangerous part of this super fast development.
So it's fascinating, and I would say, what do you see as the next sort of like the next steps in that development, and from what you've heard, from what you've seen, and how I think we're going back to making decisions, but how do we get this information to make decision, is that we make sure that we keep our humanity, because I've read around that as well, that we, even with AI, even with that technology, human beings are going to be even more important. But at the moment, it's not seen this way, because we see as the sort of the technology taking over us human. But how can we make sure that it's being reversed? Or what have you seen? It's being part in the discussion, was trying to be part in the discussion, is inform ourselves. Where the best place to inform ourselves? Because I would say that if we go on social media, we're going to hear everything and nothing, all from different sources. So where would you say that what are the best resources or the best sources to inform ourselves today?
That's a great question. I'm not sure if I have the answer to that, but what I know, there's a great work by Stuart Russell at the Berkeley University in California. Outstanding work. The Center for Humane Technology are doing lots of things about this, lots of awareness work. It's so interesting what you said, just to comment on that, because you said that it looks like the technology kind of overwhelms us, but the technology itself is created by humans. And it's really so much up to us to make the right decisions for. It's a little bit like someone actually compared the development of AI with the development of nuclear weapon. That at the very beginning, that was just a purely scientific experiment to really, distract the chemicals and, different things around this. But then at some point, it just had the potential to be much more and much more disastrous than everyone has ever, thought of. And I think that can be the case for AI as well. It can be on good, on a bad side. That's why everything is created by humans. We need to make at some point the decision how we want to use these tools.
So you were talking about one aspect that is of mental health, as there was a discussion or workshop during the summit talking about social media and mental health and how it has. So what is the impact that we can see already on the use of AI on our mental health? Or I mean, I found social media can be extremely draining of my energy. What about AI? Is it going to empower us? Is it going to really drain us, freeze us? What can we see already?
I'm not sure about this. I can just speak really from my experience. I feel like with every tool, if it's used properly, you can really benefit from that so much. But it needs to be used in a proper way. It needs to be used very conscious. I am against what is actually happening. What I'm against is like putting everything into the AI tool so it will make all the decisions for you, for example, right? So instead of kind of sitting and reflecting and doing your own research and kind of thinking through a challenge, very often people just take the knowledge from the tool and just implement the knowledge, which is not always the right thing to do, because very often, again, the tools are hallucinating, so they don't always give us the right answers. I feel like with everything, what you mentioned, Maria, I really appreciate you mentioned again values. It's coming back to what is important for you. So if you know, for example, that what is important to you is, let's say, mental health and spending time in nature, then you are not spending 8 hours a day on social media. Just don't do it. You would prioritize different things, the same as with social media, AI tools, anything else that can be addictive. And there's a potential, of course, for each technology that can be addictive, to basically set up the right boundaries for yourself.
So my takeaway from our conversation is that really being intentional with how we're going to be using new technology, whether we're talking about AI now or something else, is and making that conscious decision as well, being active rather than passive when we use it. So inform ourselves and getting some knowledge as well, not just in a passive way, but in a very active way of what I'm just not going to take for granted everything that this new technology is giving me, but I'm also going to make some conscious decision and being very intentional about how to use it.
Yes, it's definitely on the individual level, or on more broader level. Most of the things that we are using these days when it comes to technology are automated. Many of the things, physical products, are automated through AI. So there are definitely different layers of how we can approach. But what you mentioned, I really believe is super important, is to educate yourself on however level you like and whatever you need, just to be a little bit conscious about what is happening, especially when you are in the working age, and these tools will influence you regardless of if you want this or not. And of course, kind of taking care of of the future generation in a way that we also can make conscious decision to contribute, in a good way to the discussions or to the products themselves when we can, whenever we can, or in general, I feel like there is a need of more diverse ideas and contributions to the whole discussion, but also the development of the tools. Therefore, so this way we just don't make them as biased as everything else is already. We make them very diverse and very inclusive.
So being all part of the discussions.
They should be, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. I've learned a lot, and I think that I'm living with that sense of it can really enhance our creativity. But as human, we have a responsibility to make that choice, to how we're going to be intentional by using it. And I think that it's down to us as well as individuals, and then there's organizational as well. But so it's so for me, the things that I'm really taking away from our conversation is, if we want to use it in a way that it can enhance their creativity, is that we have to take responsibility for the choice that we're making and being informed and intentional.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Marie.
Thank you, Iwona.
Thank you for tuning in to today's episode of Creative Bites. It's been a pleasure sharing these stories and insights with you. Remember, creativity is all around us, ready to be discovered, nurtured, and celebrated. I'm Iwona Fluda, and until next time, keep creating, keep exploring, and keep inspiring. Thanks for listening, and goodbye for now.